there. Today we're going to talk about building a personal narrative. A few things to know as we get started. My name is Erika Haynes, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the School and State Finance Project. If you have questions or comments, you can reach out to me with this email, or you can reach out to my colleague Melanie Strout, the Community Engagement Manager. We also have an app called Ed Explorer that allows you to look at student performance, school finance, and demographics at both the school district level and the school level. A little about us. We are an organization that started in 2015. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy organization that works collaboratively with policymakers, school district officials, community leaders, community members, and parents and students to develop data-driven solutions to ensure that all public school students receive equitable education funding that supports their learning needs. Our priorities are always students, schools, and communities. We've accomplished a lot since 2015, and some of the things we're most proud of, in combination and support with our community members, includes securing an additional $770 million in equitable education funding for K-12 in Connecticut. We've fully funded the state's main education funding formula for the first time in state history. And we have implemented need-based funding for all public school students. So we're going to start today in talking about building a narrative, your story. We're really going to start with policy and advocacy. In brief, first we need to understand what policy is. And policy generally refers to a set of guidelines that are designed for decision making. In our day-to-day life, we interact with policy all the time. It might be a return policy at Walmart, the attendance policy at our children's school, our dress code for work. These are all policies. Within the context of government and public policy, we're talking about what the government, whether it's local, state, or federal, chooses to do or not to do about a problem. And advocacy, in its broadest terms, is any action taken supporting a cause or pleading a case. Advocacy is really about having your voice heard and considered when decision makers are considering policy decisions. Examples of advocacy can include phone calls or emails to elected officials, writing an op-ed or letter to the editor in a newspaper or online publication, or even a lawn sign. So, additional ways to advocate. You might speak up at a local Board of Ed meeting or a city council meeting. You might attend a rally showing support for a proposed policy. You could email or call your legislator. You could testify at a public hearing. We have them for our state legislature regularly when the legislature is in session. You could distribute or even sign a petition. You might display a sign in your yard, and you could always share a post on social media. All these actions are advocacy actions, and advocacy is really about having your voice heard, ideally in a memorable way, including your story, your lived experiences is really essential for successful advocacy. So we're going to start with a different question, which is, what is your dream? And when I'm talking about dreams, it's like not those movies in your mind when you're sleeping, but really like, what are your hopes? What do you want for yourself, for your family, for your children? According to Ice Cream for a Dream and the Dream Support Network, there are at least 10 categories of dreams. And so in our lives, we can talk about our educational dream or our philanthropy dream, a travel dream, a relationship dream, materialistic dream, personal improvement dream. We all might have a dream job we want, an entertainment dream, an entrepreneurship dream, or a philanthropy dream. What would you do if you had $1 million overnight? Dreams matter for a bunch of reasons. And so that's why we start here. We start because dreams exist in a world that's not really constrained by policy, right? When you think about your travel dream, where do you want to go? Um, you aren't thinking about what is the passport requirement? What do I need to have? You're thinking about, where do I really want to see? Do I really want to go on an African safari? Having dreams also clarifies decision making. Um, you might choose one thing over another. For instance, if your dream vacation is that African safari, somebody says, do you want to go on a vacation to Hawaii? You might say, if I'm spending that much money, I want to go on my dream vacation in safari in South Africa. So having dreams helps us clarify our decision making in a big way with like that dream vacation, but even in small ways. And dreams, when you share them, can inspire others. You can tell people why you want to go on that big safari and inspire other people to do that. And that plays out not just for a safari, but when you're talking about things like your dream job or your educational dream. And when we dream, we also model and encourage our children to do the same. And so it starts early when we ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? They aren't thinking about policies and what the restrictions are. They're thinking about what excites them. And dreaming helps keep us looking towards the future and thinking about what is possible. So I'm going to challenge you, and you can pause this video if you want, but pick a category of dream, name a dream that you have, and think about that. You don't have to drop it in the chat because if you're watching this and it's being recorded, you can't do that. But I would encourage you to think for a minute about some of these dreams and then question if you make those decisions that might help you get closer to achieving your dream. And how many of us have let go of dreams because reality kicked in, right? And we felt like that's never going to happen. Well, we need to talk about how to make that happen. So, this is where dreams connect with policy and advocacy. When we talk about a dream, it's that really over our heads kind of idea, that hope that we wish for. A lot of times policy stands in the way, right? If we talk about going on a dream vacation, and I share with you, but you haven't thought, what kind of passport do you like? Do you have your passport? Do you need special vaccines? Like, what are the policies that it's going to take to get through in order to get to that dream? Um, but advocacy is a way to shift policy in a way that supports your dream. And storytelling kind of is the foundation of all of this, because storytelling is about sharing why a dream is really important to you, what makes it something other than just an idea, and how do you attain that. And so really when we're talking today, we're going to talk about educational dreams for our kids and what that looks like. And when we talk about dreams and we talk about a high quality education that helps our kids grow and be ready for the workforce and for what we all would say is you got to be ready for the real world, right? um, what policies stand in the way of getting them there, or what do good policies that help our kids reach those dreams really look like? And your story about why this is important is super helpful for policy makers, for our elected officials to know as they think about what a policy should like? And we're going to do this through story because storytelling has so many benefits. First, more areas of the brain are activated through story than with fact alone. We at School and State Finance Project have a whole bunch of facts about education funding. But people get bored with a whole bunch of facts. People listen to stories and more parts of their brain are engaged. So they're really listening, and you want people actively listening. Experiencing emotions also enhances memory. So when you share a powerful story and activate people's emotions, they also remember what you've told them. And it's really important because there's so many issues that compete for everyone's attention in the day-to-day, including policymakers. Then connection points are created between a listener's experience and the person who is telling the story. You may be talking about your child or a friend's child who may have unique learning needs, who might be a student who gets special education supports. And that might resonate with somebody who's making a decision who has either gone through that challenge or had a family member go through that challenge. And you're building connection. And again, that enhances memory and helps us move policy in a way that matters. And I want you to think for a second. You can reflect on a story that someone told you that you remember. We hear stories all the time from our friends, from our kids when they come home from school, from our partners coming home and talking about a day at work. And so I want you to think about a story and pause for a second and think about what made it memorable. It was memorable weird, it was memorable emotional, it was memorable because you related. I want you to think about that and then restart this. So, when we talk about storytelling, we're talking about lived experiences, knowledge of your life, the life you have lived, you've experienced firsthand, that you have knowledge of. These aren't things where someone told you about someone who went through something, but your experiences and your experiences as a family, as a parent, your experiences. And it's important because you're the expert in your own lived experiences. I can't correct you in those. I can't tell you what you've had or have not had. And when you share experience through stories, you're sharing some of your expertise and you give people a unique perspective behind data, behind numbers, behind the way things should work. You're giving them the connection points of where data might not be showing a story or how to connect things that matter with the policy in front of them. You're providing insight into how current policy affects people in their day-to-day lives, why you're asking for a change, or why you're saying, please do not change this. You're providing that insight. You are the expert. So when you're sharing your lived experiences, it matters for anyone who's telling a story because we know it actually has benefits for your mental health and your physical health. You're including your experiences in society as a whole. And there's a social inclusion part of finding others that have been through shared experiences. And you're actually having meaningful participation in conversations that affect your life as a storyteller, anyone's lives as a storyteller. If you're participating with a nonprofit who's working on an issue, whether it's ours looking at school funding or other nonprofits who are focusing on great issues, it helps with collective decision making and accountability. How do you know that policy recommendations are beneficial to communities that they're supposed to be beneficial to? Lived experience, storytelling matters. And for policymakers, when you testify up in Hartford on a bill and you say, this bill matters, and let me tell you why. For policymakers, it validates that there is a problem beyond what data might say. It helps them understand the problem, and it also ensures the solution has the support of the community it is intended to serve, that it is happening with people and not to people who have said it's not going to be helpful. It level sets us. So, we're going to talk about storytelling in three parts. And there are three critical components really to storytelling as a public narrative, right? When you share this publicly, we're talking about the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. And really the weaving is like, this is my story, what I bring to this. And I can tell you that this is our story too, how it affects other people in my community or other people in my situation. And then the story of now. Why is now the time to take action? Why is now the time that you are raising your voice and asking somebody to do something? And so we're going to talk through each part of these, and we're going to really simplify this to start. The story of self, the guided question here is, why do you care about this issue? Like, what got you to the point where you're like, I need to share my story? I need to tell people about this. This is your opportunity to build credibility with your listeners. It's about, here's how I got here, and here's why I decided to raise my voice. This is my story. And who you are provides perspective about how you see an issue. A parent's voice is sometimes different than a student's voice. Both are equally valid, but come from different perspectives. And so, this is an opportunity to share your story, how you got here, why you care so much about it, and some perspective about who you are. And you can think of this in really simple terms. If you start with something like, my name is Erika, and I live in Willimantic, and I'm here to talk about school finance. I care about school finance, and this is something that you would keep relatively short. And that's a challenge, right? To tell our story in 5 sentences, one paragraph, it's really hard. But as an example, I can say I care about school finance because I have seen the inequity that we have in our school funding between towns and between school types. And it showed up for my child in that my son was in a school that only had chalkboards until he was through third grade. My son is only 16. It's not like he's 40, right? So these things are happening in our schools now. And it comes down to funding. That's the first part. So take a look at this, pause this video, and just give it a try. Throw your own 2 cents in. You can say, I'm here to talk about whatever is important to you, whether it's school lunches or better bus systems connecting more of the state. It doesn't have to be about school finance, but give it a try and then start the video again. The story of us is really, how does your story fit into the bigger picture of schools and communities, right? How do we know it's just not one weird thing that happened to you, but it's something that others are probably experiencing? It right here is a great place to share data or factual information. Um, and when you're sharing your story, you don't need a lot of data. But if you can find one or two pieces of fact to share, that helps level set that there is data behind your experience. There is research and science and fact behind your experience. Data itself doesn't move people. If you have a number that you think will move people, it doesn't. It's your story. The data adds to it. So if there's a fact or some research that you came across that you think is important to share because it helps people understand this is not just a you thing, it's an us thing, this is a good place to share it. And audience matters because if you're talking to a local decision maker, say you go to your local board of ed, the story of us is different from testifying before a state legislative hearing where they've got to really think about us very differently and in a much broader sense. And how do we build those connections? So we can try this out too. And again, we can talk with and this is a really simplified example, and it's a great starting place for you. But I could say, building on my last one, not only has school finance affected me, but it affects others in my community for sure and across our state. For example, I know that per pupil funding in our state, or I should say, per pupil spending in our state, it ranges from about 17,000 per pupil to well over $45,000 per pupil. So I know that all schools don't have the same resources. And you can stop there, right? You can stop there with your try it out, or you could tell an additional story. When my son and I visited a school from Willimantic, when we visited a school in Kent, Connecticut, it looked very different, right? And we could use that as an example if that was something that was part of my lived experience. I should say, take a break, try it out, and then come back to me. And then finally, the story of now. What are you asking people to do? Why is now the time for the action? When you're asking someone to do something now, they need to understand why now? Why not next year when I've had more time to think about it? Why is now the right time? And why is this action critical? Why is this the important action? So I could say I'm asking you to raise the foundation amount for the education cost sharing formula. The time for this action is now because that number hasn't been raised since 2013. And inflation in that time has been 40%, which means that our foundation amount, instead of being $11,525, should be about $16,000. And those dollars represent significant investments in kids in our communities, almost 500,000 kids across the state. So we can look at this and we can build this kind of narrative of what's my story? Why is it not just a me problem, but an us problem? And why is now the right time? Um, the time for the action is now because you've got great bills ahead of you, because school districts can't afford to wait longer, because property taxes will go up to fill the gap. We could talk about a lot of different reasons, and you can identify that based on the solution that they're looking at the moment. Your story, your public narrative is going to change as where you testify changes, where you speak out or advocate changes, who you're speaking to changes, and the opportunities that are in front of you change. But this is a good format and structure. So feel free to try it out and come back. And I want to give you just a few important notes on this. When you're building your personal narrative, our stories are long. They're complicated, and it took us many years to get where we are. But you will have a limited amount of time to talk about your story. It's never going to be enough to talk about your full story. Your story can and will change depending not just on what you're advocating for, but the audience and the space. Um, you certainly can't tell your story in full on social media if you're doing one short reel or Instagram post. Um, when you write your story and you're going to share it publicly, you want to, if you're going to speak it, read it, practice it, share it, get feedback on it. Our stories are incredibly personal, and sometimes we get too close to it to edit it well. It's all important to us. And we need somebody else to say, you can take out about half of that and still make your point. Ask people, does this make my point? Is it clear? And how can I improve it? Here's a slide to look at to bring it all together. Those three pieces of try it out. Now you can bring it all together and kind of play with, how does this feel? How does this feel when I'm advocating at a local level or at a state level? How does this feel when I'm telling somebody about the opportunity just in casual conversation? This is a good slide for y'all. Some other things to remember. We want to remember, who is your audience? Are they community members? Are they influencers? Not in like an Instagram or TikTok kind of way, but do they have power in your community? Really well respected in your community, even if they're not an elected official? Are they a decision maker? Are they a business owner, a parent? Are these people you know, or are they people you might be speaking to for the first time? Because that changes how you approach it. And what's their frame of reference? Do they know what you're talking about? Are you going to have to give them a little more history? You have to remember that this is your story. It's no one else's story. So you have to talk about your lived experience, what you've witnessed or experienced. And for us, it would be about inequitable school funding, but that issue changes, right? We care about multiple things too. So, what have you witnessed that made you concerned about how we fund schools? What have you experienced? Is there a moment in time or a fact that stands out to you as critical to you deciding, oh, I have to raise my voice in this moment? Your story should evolve. Your story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There should be a main character. Might be you, might be your child. And you want to maintain who the story is about and ensure that that person is relatable to your audience. Um, there is great power in speaking out as a parent. Um, and I think when we talk about education and our experiences too, it's one of the things we all share. Everybody has been in school. So we all share those things. So remember, you can make your story relatable, and you should. You need to be very clear about the problem you're speaking about, and don't throw a bunch of data at people. There are plenty of organizations that can throw data, but well, our organization can provide a lot of data and a lot of pieces of education funding. Um, we can't tell your experience or your story, so you are the most important thing. You definitely want to make sure you identify that what is being proposed is the right solution, and let them know how it would change things. For instance, at the end of the day, if there were more funding, my child's school would have had smart boards like other schools had smart boards at the same time, and not chalkboards. I'm going to pause here with one other helpful tip, and that is in most cases, if you're testifying up in Hartford and in front of the legislature, or you're going to a local board meeting, city council, board of education, board of finance, other local boards, you will get 3 minutes. Your story has to fit in 3 minutes. All those things, the story of me, us, now, maybe drop a fact bomb, tell your story. You have 3 minutes. So that's why it's going to be important to practice, practice, practice. And then there are a lot of ways that you can share your story through direct advocacy. You might reach out to a decision maker, whether it is your state representative or state senator, might be your mayor or a town council member. There are a lot of ways you can connect directly with a decision maker. You might do it through a meeting in person or Zoom. You might do it in a phone conversation. You might email them. And certainly, sometimes you just get an opportunity by bumping into them to say, hey, in a quick 30 seconds, here's what is important. Um, your story needs to be short and it needs to connect with what you're wanting them to do. And you really need to be clear about that. When you do testify, there are rules. Like I said, it's usually 3 minutes. And you'll need to find out the rules when you sign up. And then you're going to have to practice, because if you exceed the time limit, they'll cut you off. And you don't want to just get to the good part of your story and have that lost in time. So again, practice. You can also submit it in writing. You can write a letter to the editor. There are a lot of online and in-print publications. You might do an opinion piece. It's a little longer than a letter to the editor. If you're a writer and you like writing, this is a good advocacy path for you. But you definitely want to read some of what's been submitted so that you can make sure you have an understanding of the flavor, the tone, and kind of what they're expecting, so you can align with their expectations. And then you need to call attention to the issue, share your story in brief, and ask people to take action, either by learning about it or by taking advocacy action steps. You can always connect with advocacy organizations. We do facilitate advocacy. We want you to be able to tell your story and talk about the things you care about. If you're concerned about education funding, we track all related bills and we keep you posted. And we do that on social media. We also do that through email and on our website. And you can share your story. So I would encourage you, whether it's ours or you're interested in housing or food security or public health, find a good advocacy organization that can keep you posted and help make it easier to take action. And finally, social media, which is a fabulous way to advocate. But I think it's important that we just note that you're not going to change people's minds because of a social media post. You are also not going to change people's minds by arguing on social media. So think of social media as an opportunity to either share advocacy efforts with like-minded people, right? People who are like, great, I didn't know what I could do, and this is really helpful. Even sharing meeting dates. Now people know where or when a meeting is so they can take action. And you can share posts from credible organizations who are considered experts, but really be clear about what you're posting. And I want to just share too that we don't have it in here, but AI is everywhere. And so we always get an urge to see a post and share a post because it aligns with our beliefs and our frustrations. And you need to really be responsible with social media and fact check things. And if you want to see a kind of great arc in um, being able to do that story of me, of us, of now, I would encourage you to look at Barack Obama's 2008 DNC acceptance speech, and you could slide it forward to about the 5 minute mark, and you'll actually be able to see it unfold in a very artful manner. Um, that's it for us here. If you have questions, feel free to reach out, and we wish you luck in your advocacy journey. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.